For generations, the world looked at Africa as a supplier, a continent of endless resources: gold, oil, diamonds, cobalt, and rare earth minerals, all taken from its soil, shipped abroad, and sold back at 10 times the price. But that story is changing. Power is beginning to flow back to where it all began. Africa is no longer waiting for permission. Africa is no longer following anyone's script. Across the continent, new alliances are forming. Nations that once stood apart are now standing together, building railways, ports, digital corridors, and energy networks that connect entire regions. This isn't charity. It's strategy, a long-term vision measured not in years, but in generations. Economists used to say that Africa's potential was the future, but that future is happening right now. Experts project that the combined African economy could reach $25 trillion within the next 2 decades. That's not a dream. That's momentum, driven by a young population, natural wealth, and a hunger for change that the world can no longer ignore. From Nigeria's booming tech hubs to Ethiopia's industrial parks, from Ghana's gold refineries to Kenya's green energy grids, the story is the same: transformation from within. A new generation of leaders, entrepreneurs, and thinkers is asking one question: why should Africa keep exporting raw materials when it can produce finished products? They are investing in refineries, factories, research centers, fintech companies, and even satellite programs. They are building supply chains that were once controlled from outside the continent. And for the first time in modern history, the profits, the patents, and the pride are staying home. Analysts across the world are starting to pay attention. What began as a quiet shift has become a global tremor. Major economies that once dictated the rules are now competing for partnership deals. Energy corporations, technology giants, and investors are realizing the same truth. If you want a future, you must build it with Africa, not around it. But this rise is not about rivalry. It's about balance. For decades, wealth and opportunity flowed one way. Now, they are beginning to flow in every direction. Every solar panel installed in Senegal, every fiber optic line laid in Tanzania, every innovation hub launched in Rwanda, each one adds up to something bigger. Together, they form the foundation of a self-sustaining engine of growth that could redefine the global economy. And here's the truth that can no longer be hidden. Africa's story is not one of poverty needing rescue. It's a story of abundance demanding recognition. This continent holds more than 30% of the planet's mineral resources, the fastest growing cities, and the youngest workforce on Earth. By 2050, 1 out of every 4 people alive will be African. That is not a statistic. That is power. This $25 trillion power move is not the result of a single policy or a single summit. It is the product of millions of small choices, made by farmers who became exporters, engineers who built new energy grids, and students who coded solutions that changed their communities. Africa is no longer asking to join the global economy. Africa is becoming the global economy's new center of gravity, its growth engine, its creative heart, and its moral compass. As the world races to secure resources, energy, and markets for the future, Africa's message is simple. We are open for partnership, but on our own terms. The old order is fading. A new rhythm is rising. From the streets of Accra, the deserts of Niger, the highlands of Ethiopia, and the coasts of Mozambique. It is a rhythm of unity, innovation, and dignity. A rhythm of a continent that refuses to be defined by its past, because it is too busy building its future. When Africa moves, the world feels it. And right now, Africa is moving like never before. For decades, the world looked at Africa through the wrong lens. To many, it was a continent defined by what it lacked: infrastructure, capital, and stability. But beneath those stereotypes, something powerful was always alive, a quiet strength, waiting to rise. That strength is now awake. Across Africa, a new kind of leadership is emerging, one that isn't built on dependence or foreign aid, but on sovereignty and strategy. Countries are no longer asking how to fit into the global system. They're asking how to shape it. Ethiopia, once known mainly for its history and culture, is now positioning itself as the industrial heart of East Africa. Massive rail networks link its cities to Djibouti's ports, transporting goods that used to take weeks in just hours. The nation has become a manufacturing hub for textiles, electric buses, and even renewable energy technologies that rival those of Europe and Asia. In the south, Zambia and the Democratic Republic of Congo have joined forces, forming a cross-border alliance to refine their own cobalt and lithium instead of exporting them raw. It's a bold move that directly challenges the global tech industry's dependence on cheap African resources. By keeping the refining process local, Africa is keeping the profits, the jobs, and the control. Meanwhile, Nigeria, Africa's giant, is no longer relying solely on oil. It's now building one of the largest natural gas and digital economies in the developing world. From the bustling tech city of Lagos to the energy corridors of Port Harcourt, innovation is replacing dependency. Every year, new startups rise, attracting billions in venture capital from investors who now see Nigeria not as risk, but as opportunity. But this awakening isn't just economic. It's cultural. It's psychological. For the first time in generations, young Africans are seeing themselves not as workers in someone else's factory, but as the architects of their own destiny. Universities across Kenya, Rwanda, and Ghana are producing engineers, data scientists, and entrepreneurs who are staying home, choosing to build in Africa rather than seek opportunities abroad. They are rewriting what it means to be African in the modern world. And behind this shift lies a truth the world rarely acknowledges. Africa has always been rich, not just in resources, but in resilience, creativity, and vision. It was never poor, it was plundered. And now, it's reclaiming what was taken, not through war or conflict, but through unity, innovation, and negotiation. Global powers are watching closely. The United States, the European Union, and China are all competing for influence, trying to secure access to Africa's minerals, land, and markets. But the game has changed. African leaders are negotiating from a position of strength, demanding fair trade, local processing, and long-term partnerships instead of quick deals. The African Continental Free Trade Area, the world's largest single market by number of countries, is bringing together over 1.4 billion people under one economic vision. When fully realized, it will create a trade zone larger than the European Union, reshaping how goods, technology, and power flow across the globe. For too long, Africa's wealth has been exported while its people remained poor. Now, the script is flipping. Countries are taxing raw exports, investing in local factories, and creating homegrown industries that can compete globally. And that's what scares the West the most. Because every step Africa takes towards self-sufficiency reduces the leverage of those who once controlled it. For the first time, Africa isn't asking for aid. It's setting the terms of business. And that's the essence of this awakening. Power is returning to its rightful source. What we're witnessing isn't a dream. It's the rebirth of a continent. A continent that no longer needs validation because it has found its voice. And that voice is echoing louder than ever, in every parliament, every factory, and every classroom across the land. This is the Africa the world wasn't ready for. And this is only the beginning. The tremors of Africa's awakening are now shaking the very foundations of the global order. What began as scattered acts of independence has grown into a continental wave, unstoppable, undeniable, and unmistakable. For the first time in modern history, Africa is setting the terms of engagement. From the halls of Addis Ababa to the oil fields of Nigeria, from the copper belts of Zambia to the gold reserves of Mali, a new rhythm of power is emerging. And this rhythm isn't dictated by Washington, Paris, or London anymore. It's written in African hands, for African people. Let's call it what it is, a power shift. The United States, which once enjoyed near total dominance over global supply chains, is watching that control slip through its fingers. Why? Because the resources that fuel the 21st century, cobalt, lithium, graphite, manganese, and rare earth minerals, are no longer freely leaving African soil. They're being processed right here. When the Democratic Republic of Congo and Zambia announced their $35 billion joint plan to refine cobalt domestically, the world took notice. Suddenly, the U.S. tech giants that depend on cobalt for batteries and smartphones found themselves in crisis meetings. Apple, Tesla, and other corporations realized that the lifeblood of their technology, the metals that power their devices, would soon be beyond their easy reach. But the story doesn't end there. Ethiopia, rich in rare earth elements, has joined the League of Nations asserting control over their critical minerals. By nationalizing parts of its mining industry and partnering strategically with China and Russia instead of the West, Ethiopia is building leverage, economic, political, and psychological. That move alone sent shockwaves through Washington and Brussels. They understood what it meant. Africa was no longer the supplier. Africa was becoming the manufacturer. Meanwhile, nations like Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger are forging something unprecedented, a Pan-African security and economic alliance independent of Western influence. Their message to the world is simple. Africa will protect its resources and dictate its own future. This alliance, backed by shared vision and mutual defense, is transforming into something the West has feared for decades, a unified Africa with both political will and economic strategy. Think about this. Over $10 trillion worth of untapped resources lie beneath African soil. For decades, those resources were extracted for pennies and sold back as finished products for billions. That economic imbalance built the skyscrapers of New York, the industries of London, and the factories of Paris. But now, Africa wants to turn that $10 trillion into $100 trillion by refining, processing, and exporting its own finished goods. That's why the power shift terrifies the West. Because it's not just about minerals, it's about independence. Look at what's happening in Nigeria. New oil refineries like the massive Dangote complex are redefining Africa's energy map. For the first time, Nigeria can refine enough fuel to meet its own needs, and even export to other countries. This ends decades of dependence on imported refined products and strikes at the very heart of the old economic control model. Ghana is doing the same with gold. Zimbabwe is doing it with lithium. Tanzania with natural gas. Kenya with green hydrogen. Each country, in its own way, is building a brick in the foundation of Africa's independence. The shift is so profound that even international investors, from China, India, the UAE, and Russia, are realigning their global strategies to fit into Africa's rise. Billions are being poured into African infrastructure, not as aid, but as investment. New railways, power grids, and digital networks are connecting the continent in ways never imagined before. But the most remarkable part? Africa isn't selling out this time. Agreements are being rewritten to ensure local ownership, job creation, and profit sharing. Every deal signed today carries one message. Never again shall Africa be exploited. The West is watching, nervous, anxious, and uncertain. For the first time, its economic grip on the continent is loosening. Every new African factory means fewer Western exports. Every new African refinery means fewer Western profits. It's a quiet revolution, but its effects are global. In boardrooms from Silicon Valley to Brussels, analysts are warning of the African effect, a chain reaction that could redefine global trade. If Africa processes its own minerals, energy costs in the West could skyrocket. If Africa unites its trade zones, Western goods could lose competitiveness. And if Africa fully industrializes, global power will shift permanently toward the global South. That's not a theory. It's already happening. The numbers speak for themselves. In just the last 5 years, Africa's foreign direct investment has grown by over 80%. Intra-African trade has increased by 35%. And for the first time ever, African nations are investing more in each other than in foreign markets. It's not just progress, it's transformation. The kind the world has never seen before. This is not the Africa of colonial maps or IMF loans. This is Africa 2.0, confident, connected, and commanding respect on the world stage. And the truth is, this new Africa doesn't need validation. It doesn't need permission, because the power has already shifted. The world has noticed. From Washington to Paris, from London to Berlin, policy desks are burning the midnight oil, asking one question: how did Africa do it? For decades, the narrative was that Africa needed help. Aid programs, structural adjustments, debt relief, each offered with conditions that kept the continent dependent. But the new generation of African leaders flipped the script. They studied global economics, learned the rules, and began rewriting them. When Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger formed their regional defense and economic pact, many thought it would crumble in months. Instead, it became a symbol, a declaration that Africa could protect its own interests without foreign troops. And while Western analysts predicted instability, the opposite happened. African markets began to stabilize. Foreign investors started returning, but this time on Africa's terms. No more one-sided contracts. No more resource for peanuts. Now, Western leaders are realizing a hard truth. Africa's rise doesn't weaken the world, it rebalances it. But that balance means sharing power, and that's what scares the old system the most. Meanwhile, in Asia and the Middle East, the reaction is very different. China, India, the UAE, and Saudi Arabia see Africa as the new frontier of opportunity, a continent not to exploit, but to partner with. In the last 2 years alone, these nations have pledged more than $500 billion in infrastructure, energy, and manufacturing projects across Africa. That's not aid. That's investment in the world's next economic engine. And this shift isn't just economic, it's cultural. Across social media, young Africans are reclaiming pride in their heritage. Afrobeats rules the global charts. African fashion dazzles Paris and New York. African tech startups attract Silicon Valley-level funding. It's no longer about catching up with the world. It's about setting the pace. So when analysts call this a $25 trillion power move, they're not exaggerating. Africa's combined GDP could exceed that within a generation, if the momentum continues. And everything happening today, the mineral processing, the renewable energy push, the digital revolution, is laying the foundation for that future. The West knows it. The East knows it. And now, Africa knows it too. But here's the most important truth. This rise isn't about rivalry. It's about realization that the continent which powered the Industrial Revolution with its resources now powers the digital revolution with its potential. The story has come full circle. Yet the journey ahead isn't without obstacles. Infrastructure gaps remain. Some governments still battle corruption, instability, and foreign pressure. But the difference now is awareness. The people know their worth, and they won't settle for less. Every trade deal signed today carries a warning written between the lines. Africa will not be a supplier of raw materials alone. Africa will be the producer, the designer, the owner. And as this awareness grows, the rest of the world has two choices: adapt or be left behind. Because Africa's march towards self-reliance is no longer a dream. It's policy, backed by data, demand, and determination. From the solar fields of Morocco to the tech hubs of Nairobi, from the lithium mines of Zimbabwe to the ports of Djibouti, the continent hums with ambition. And that ambition has become contagious. Young Africans in the diaspora are returning home. Engineers, doctors, creators, bringing experience and investment. They see what many once missed. Africa isn't the past of the world, it's the future. So, as the headlines shift and markets adjust, remember this: when Africa rises, the world changes. Not through war, not through conflict, but through balance, justice, and vision. This is the dawn of a new global order, one led by partnership, not dominance. One powered by Africa's unity and ingenuity. And in years to come, historians will look back at this moment, the moment the world finally realized. The future wasn't being written in Washington, London, or Beijing. It was being written in Lagos, Addis Ababa, Nairobi, and Accra. Africa is not coming. Africa is here. And the world will never be the same again.
Welcome to African Spotlight 24, your premier source for news and current affairs from across the continent. We're glad you're here. If you're new to our channel, please subscribe, like, and turn on notification to stay up to date with the latest news and analysis. Your support helps us reach more people. Disclaimer: the content of this video is based on credible, publicly available information and is intended for educational, analytical, and informational purposes only. African Spotlight 24 does not promote hate, violence, misinformation, or political unrest. Our goal is to deliver thoughtful insights, highlight local voices, and encourage informed conversations throughout Africa.